this Sunday on Rosemary Barton Live.
We wanted you to hear the Canadians are with you.
Show of unity. Party leaders put politics aside as the community of Tumbler Ridge grieves. How is it coping? The MP for the riding that represents Tumbler Ridge, Bob Zimmer, is here.
For the purpose of now, it is about grieving. It's about supporting the community.
Federal support. Ottawa offers to help Tumbler Ridge as questions arise about Canada's gun laws. How did the shooter gain access to weapons? Public Safety Minister Gary Anandasangari joins me.
I think we have been far too lax in our view of security in the Arctic.
Arctic security. A Republican senator travels to Greenland after threats by the U.S. president. What is her message to NATO allies? I'll ask the U.S. Senator from Alaska, Lisa Murkowski. It all starts now on Rosemary Barton Live.
Thanks so much for joining us on this Sunday. An emotional memorial brought together all federal party leaders and other politicians to remember the lives lost in Tumbler Ridge.
When you wake up tomorrow and the world feels impossible, know that millions of Canadians are with you. When the cameras leave and the quiet sets in, know that we still will be here. And know that we shall need you too. Because Canada is a community that relies on each other's grace.
Leaders put aside party politics to unite the community and Canada in this time of mourning. The massacre in Tumbler Ridge left 8 victims, including 6 children and more than 25 injured, marking one of the deadliest shootings in Canadian history. For the latest on the story on the ground, the CBC's Sam Sampson joins us from Tumbler Ridge, BC. Sam, thanks for joining us this morning. Tell us what's the latest you're just hearing down there.
Well, I just finished having a conversation with somebody who said, you know, it's been quite a few days, as you can imagine, for this very small community, only about 2,500 people here in Tumbler Ridge, and it has just been chaos up until this weekend when things kind of started to, in terms of the number of people around, people who don't live here like myself, kind of the crowds have started to deplete. And so they're trying to grasp any kind of sense of normalcy that they can. Where we are right now, we are pretty much right where that vigil on Friday was with the different federal leaders. And I want you to take a look at the memorial that has slowly grown since then. So after the federal leaders and different politicians spoke, people were invited to lay down their candles, flowers. The cups that you see there have stickers that say Tumbler Strong. Of course, just an acknowledgement of just, again, the strength in this community. And even when we were here yesterday and we were chatting with some people, and it was kind of a steady stream of people adding to this memorial. You could see some stuffed animals. There are handwritten cards. There's even a carved out TR for Tumbler Ridge with the names of the victims written on it. And so, yeah, we've been chatting with people who have been laying down different flowers and whatnot. And I've also asked people what they thought about the vigil necessarily. So with all these politicians descending upon your town, did that help? And the message I've heard is, yeah, it did. It showed that unity. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre really did speak about how everybody was setting their politics aside for this time and just coming together as mothers, fathers, uncles, aunts, just people who are here for those in Tumbler Ridge. That is the balance, I would imagine, as a politician when you're coming to a place that has just been struck by tragedy, that you don't want to take attention away from what's going on. And the people here said, yeah, that was the case. They were very respectful.
So tell us what we know about the investigation at this point, because that, of course, is what a lot of people are thinking about now.
Well, it's still ongoing. I mean, this morning we drove by the school and the police tape, it looks like, has since been removed. RCMP said they were hoping to finish their forensic investigation of the building so that they would leave the school by the end of the weekend. I've also asked for an update on the 8 autopsies of the victims that were shot and killed both at the shooter's home and as well at the school. In terms of the firearms that were used, RCMP brought up 4 different guns, 2 that were in possession at the home and then 2 that were used at the school. They said 2 of those had not been seized by police before, which naturally begs the question, had police seized 2 of the other guns before? Because we do know police had been called to the shooter's home in the past for mental health reasons and had confiscated guns in the past, but eventually returned them. And here are more questions that are coming up because of that history.
We need to know much more about why weapons were seized and clearly why they were returned. We have a red flag law in Canada that basically says the police can seize arms if they have reason to suppose they might be used to kill an individual or to hurt people around that individual. And there's a procedure for the owner of those arms to petition to get them back. But normally they would only be returned if everyone is sure that the original reasons were mistaken.
Now, that professor emeritus said he would like to see an inquiry like we saw with the Mass Casualty Commission after the 2020 mass shooting in Portapique, Nova Scotia. But Rosie, as someone who's covered those kinds of inquiries, those can be extremely hard on the communities that have already suffered and could actually prolong the grieving process.
CBC's Sam Sampson in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia for us this morning. Thanks so much, Sam. Bob Zimmer is the MP for the area. He was also at that memorial with the Prime Minister and his leader, Pierre Poilievre, on Friday night, and he joins me this morning. Bob, thank you for making the time.
Thanks for having me, Rosie.
What was that like, the memorial, to have, I would imagine, most of the town there, as well as your leader and the Prime Minister?
Yeah, it was, it's been a tragic week, and to me, it was a beautiful moment, I think, where we all just united behind the very strong community of Tumbler Ridge and the people and the victims' families, and just to show them that, look, you have the entire nation behind you right now. And I think the leaders were very symbolic of that, that sort of that cross-country just sorrow and mourning. And I think it was a beautiful moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too often you see the Prime Minister and Pierre Poilievre holding hands in prayer, and we saw that on Friday night. I saw you speak to the Prime Minister a couple of times. I wonder what you said to him as sort of the spokesperson, the representative of the community, in terms of what is needed.
Well, it was really just about mourning, and you get to know leaders. I know them in a personal way, and they're just people. They have kids themselves, and they sort of their hearts break as any parent would for their children. So it was really just about that. We had some meetings with the families just privately with Pierre and Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, and they were just listening to who these kids were, who the mother was who was killed. We talked to both of their children, and you just get to know who they are. So it was really around that kind of just getting to know who these people were, and the love that their families still have for them, and just help them grieve, and but help them also remember in a real positive way.
And what do they need? I spoke to the Public Safety Minister on Friday. You're going to see that interview after you, who said there are going to be some people on the ground on Tuesday to help, for instance, with like income supports for families. What are you hearing about the practical things that people might need?
Yeah, and that's sort of what we've been doing a lot of. So we just, there's financial needs, so, simple things. So, you have a crisis in your family, but how do you make your mortgage payment if you have to stay home from work? And how do you make your car payments and things? And dealing with funeral homes, we've been helping a family deal with getting in touch with funeral homes and transport of their children back to their communities and things like that. So there's a practical side, but then there's also when you're sitting there on the couch in their home talking about this stuff, you just cry with them and you talk with them. And the one young man's family, his dad brought out this toy that he had made his dad, this little truck, because his dad has a truck, and they didn't have a trailer yet for the truck. So his son made this, it's young Abel, and he had made this trailer, this little wood toy, and for his dad. So he has this toy in front, and what was just a woodwork project has become a very precious thing indeed to his family.
How concerned are you, or where is your thinking right now about mental health? Because we know that the shooter had been taken away under the Mental Health Act and tried to get help, and obviously that didn't work. Where is your thinking in terms of supports for mental health in rural Canada, in a place like Tumbler Ridge?
Yeah, we've heard a lot of concerns about that. Even just health, physical health as well, and mental health is very much a part of that physical health. We've heard there are lacks, across rural Canada, and that lack needs to be addressed. And so, no, we've heard many people talking about it now. I guess it's just from now, how does that happen? I will say, from the Premier to the Prime Minister to our leader Pierre Poilievre, we're committed to finding solutions to make it happen.
And in terms of the firearms, Bob Zimmer, again, lots of questions around how this person got access to them, given that their license seems to have expired. What questions do you have around the safe keeping of weapons in a home?
Yeah, I've really tried to stay away from answering those kind of questions yet. I think, but they're good questions, and I will answer. I will say there's a lot of people rightfully asking, like, why did they get these firearms back after the mental health challenges? They were removed. Why were they given back, considering what we've seen play out here? So I think that's what an investigation will let us know a little bit more information about, whether there's an inquiry or not. I heard your reporter say it can be more traumatic on the community. Yeah. But I think a lot of those questions that, we never want to see this happen again. I will say, if Tumbler Ridge residents and family members would say anything, we wish this would wouldn't happen on any community ever again. So I think we'll see where that goes. And again, it's early, but we'll be watching it closely, especially from my end as a local representative. We want answers, and we want to make sure that we have solutions afterwards.
I noticed on Friday, too, that the Premier said that the students don't have to go back to the school if they don't want to. Have you had any conversations yet about whether they plan to do that, or whether there's another location that those residents, those kids could go to?
Well, I talked to was communicating with the teacher last night, and the question is, well, where do you go then, right? Yeah. Because it's not really, there's other places you probably can go to have school, but it becomes a lot more difficult. So, but the Premier did commit to, he didn't want to see those kids if they didn't want to go through the doors of the school again, to not have to. So again, we'll see where that goes. I just know even from the Prime Minister, Premier, us, we're going to do whatever we can to make the community to make them as comfortable as possible in the steps forward in the next weeks and years.
Bob Zimmer, you're also a dad. I think you've got 4 kids, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we do.
How are you holding up? How are you doing?
Good. It's I just catch myself saying it again. Good. I guess I can say this, Rosie, and I don't want to get too. Jesus has been the light to me in this time. It's tough. I by no means am as grieving and as close to the issue as the parents of the families and the kids of the siblings and all the rest of it. But he's really been a light to me, just in the dark times. And like we said, even for Tumbler Ridge, there's a cloud over Tumbler right now. But I will say the members of Tumbler Ridge want the sun to shine again. There's a time to mourn, but they don't want to be remembered for this tragedy and this situation. It was a beautiful town before. It was beautiful people. They want to get back to that again. That's why they're there in the first place. It's just a beautiful community. So I think being here for them, for that, just to get back to that sun shining again in Tumbler Ridge is it's going to take some steps and some time, but we're going to be here.
Well, Bob Zimmer, I'm sure they appreciate all you're doing to help represent them in this difficult time.
I just wanted to show this, Rosie. This is Canada, our Tumbler Ridge Strong. You can see that sticker. They made them right away. I think they were out within the first day, but I think the community wants us to appreciate all the love that everybody across Canada, the millions of Canadians, have given them. And just last request I would have is just keep praying for Tumbler Ridge, keep praying for Maya. I know Maya's still in hospital, seems to be getting better, but we just ask that you pray for her and her mom and her family. And all the rest of the families, too, that are still hurting.
Sure. Thank you, Bob Zimmer. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you speaking with us.
Thanks, Rosie.
Okay. With the RCMP investigation still underway, lots of questions, some of them I just asked there, about the shooter's access to firearms.
The main firearm, believed to be the one that caused the most significant damage, is origins unknown. It's never been in previous RCMP control.
Up next, my conversation with the federal public safety minister. You're watching Rosemary Barton Live. The RCMP revealed new details on the guns used in the Tumbler Ridge tragedy and the shooter's potential motive.
There was no specific targeting of any individuals. This suspect was, for lack of a better term, hunting. They were prepared and engaging anybody and everybody they could come in contact with.
4 firearms are under investigation now in connection to the shooting, 2 being seized at the school, 2 at the shooter's home. Firearms had previously been seized from that home and then returned under Canada's red flag laws that temporarily remove firearms from someone posing a safety risk to themselves or others. We now know the guns used in the shooting had not previously been taken from the home. On Friday, I spoke to the Minister of Public Safety about the shooter's access to firearms in the home before that RCMP update. Minister Ananda Sanguri, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Rosemary.
I want to start with your trip out to Tumbler Ridge. You went right away. What was that like for you? What did you hear in the community?
Well, I, along with Mr. Robertson and Premier Eby and Krieger, went out together as a federal and provincial government into the community. Certainly, unfathomable experience. The community is devastated. It's a very small-knit community of about 2,500 people. Everyone knows each other. Everyone knew someone at the school. Everyone knew someone who died. The community is torn apart. But in this depth of despair, there's also some silver linings of incredible heroism by teachers, by even other students, by the RCMP who were there within 2 minutes, who likely saved many lives, along with first responders. So it is a moment where I think it's brought the community together. It's also brought the country together. It's brought so many different perspectives together as one voice to say we first and foremost extend our fullest love and support for the people of Tumbler Ridge, and we embrace them, and we will support them every step of the way.
And I'll ask you about what that support might look like, but I do want to ask you a couple of questions about what we know about what happened. As you know, in 2023, there were new federal laws that came into effect that would allow firearms to be removed from homes where they believe that an individual poses a safety risk to themselves or others. In this instance, with the shooter, the firearms were later returned to the home because the owner of the guns petitioned for them to be returned. First of all, do you know if those guns were owned by the shooter or by the shooter's mother? Do you know that?
There are a lot of questions that will need to be answered. As you're aware, the investigation is ongoing. So I think once the investigation is complete, and RCMP is committed to providing more information on this issue itself, but broadly on the investigation overall.
And I'm going to keep asking questions, and we'll see whether you can fill in any of the blanks, Minister. The red flag, this is called a red flag law, just so people understand. Do you know why that petition was accepted and why guns were allowed back into that home?
I'm not aware of the circumstances. There's some speculation. There's some information provided by Deputy Commissioner McDonald a couple of days ago. But I think for now, the plethora of questions that are being posed, whether it's to me or to the RCMP or to others in the community, I think we'll have to wait until the investigation is complete, but more importantly, until the grieving process is complete. Like, this is very raw. You know, as people were preparing for Family Day on Monday, some families are having to figure out funeral arrangements for their kids. There's 2 kids right now who are clinging to their life, Maya and Paige and their family. So I think there's a range of questions that people will have, rightfully have, and there will be answers forthcoming. I will be there to provide those answers, as well as the RCMP, but also to look at what the short and long, mid-term and long-term work that we need to do. But for the purpose of now, it is about grieving. It's about supporting the community in probably one of the worst times in their history.
Yes, and please understand that these questions are not meant to take away from that or diminish that, but the questions are present already, and you know, there will be, I think, a need by the community to have answers to some of the things I'm asking. So I'm simply trying to see whether you know things that I don't know specifically. So I'm just going to go back to the issue of the red flag legislation, because I know back in the fall you funded a number of organizations across the country to sort of raise awareness about this legislation. Do you think that this legislation, red flag legislation, is working broadly? Do you have any way of determining whether it has made a difference?
I think the questions around whether our laws are effective and what we need to do to strengthen them again will be answered. And I go back to what the immediate concerns are, which is the community that needs support and love to heal and to start that healing process. The range of questions that are in the public domain, whether it's through social media or through other snippets of information people have, it's premature for us to make any types of conclusions without having the RCMP fully offer their perspective on the investigation, and we our commitment as a federal government, my personal commitment, is to be there to answer those questions and to respond accordingly. But as the Prime Minister is going out with other party leaders to support the community in mourning, all Canadians, I think, are united in our grief and united in our resolve to ensure that this never happens again.
Right, and again, the questions I'm asking are in that line, and I understand you maybe don't have the answers yet because the RCMP is investigating. I'm going to ask one more, though, because you are also moving forward on a gun buyback program across the country that is having, I would say, it's not clear whether it's going to be ultimately successful given some provinces don't want to participate. Do you know if the weapons used would have fallen under the gun buyback program?
At this point, there is no clarity on that, and again, I will wait for the RCMP to give us additional information.
What is the federal government doing then to support the community, other than, of course, your presence and the Prime Minister's presence? What practically can you do here?
We have already spent the last couple of days in Tumbler Ridge. We met with the mayor along with Mr. Robertson, as well as Premier Eby and Minister Krieger, along with local elected politicians, including Bob Zimmer, who's the MP for the area. Our commitment clearly to them from a federal perspective was to support the community in every which way they need support. We will have regularized coordination calls for the province. As is, when we met with Northern Health, they required additional resources for mental health support. The province is advancing that. We have a range of supports that are available, including income security for parents who are grieving the passing of their children, as well as others who may have significant impacts, including other kids' families from the school who are traumatized and who may not be able to go to work. So we will have that available. We'll have Service Canada personnel on the ground starting Tuesday, so right after Family Day. We will have public safety officials there as well to coordinate broader supports, whether it's on mental health and youth and other types of support that people need. The bottom line here is that we will be there with the community every step of the way. We will support the province of British Columbia, and we will work in tandem with them to offer assistance of any kind that the federal government may be able to do.
All right, Minister Anand Sangari, thank you for taking my questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rosemary.
What to make of this show of unity from elected officials from all levels of government that came together to help a grieving community?
We're here to underline the message that you've heard tonight about the unity of our response as a provincial government across partisan lines.
BC Premier David Eby there. All federal party leaders also attended the vigil, traveling together from Ottawa to honor the victims and those impacted. How important was this show of solidarity for Canadians in a moment like this? Our Sunday Scrum is standing by. You're watching RBL.
I, the leader of the opposition, the leader of all the federal parties, wanted you to hear, not from Ottawa, not through a screen, but standing here together.
Today, there are no Conservatives. There are no Liberals, New Democrats, Greens, or Bloc Québécois. We are all, as we were in that plane together, mothers and fathers.
As we've been mentioning, all federal party leaders were in Tumbler Ridge for the vigil. They traveled together in the Prime Minister's plane, putting politics aside. How important was this show of unity, and what does it signal about Canadian politics? Let's bring back our Sunday Scrum. Sherelle Evelyn, managing editor of the Hill Times. Robert Benzie, Queen's Park bureau chief for the Toronto Star, and Jason Markusoff, producer and writer for CBC News in Calgary. Good to see you all again. I mean, in these moments, and this is the reason I want to talk about it, leaders and politicians do have an important role to play. And I guess my question is whether they managed to sort of meet the moment, and what you thought the past few days says about Canadian politicians or Canadian politics. Jason, I'll start with you on that.
I mean, I almost, in trying to understand that I think about the opposite, like what would happen if somebody didn't meet the moment, if somebody, if somebody acted in a partisan way, if they looked right to the solutions, demanding answers in this moment when people are grieving. I mean, so much of politics is meeting people where they are, and where they are certainly in Tumbler Ridge and in much of the rest of the country is shock at what has happened, to have to grieve so many 11, 12, 13-year-olds. And as the politicians themselves said, I think it's probably their parents, when there was that one picture of Polyev and Mary Simon and Carney together, and Carney has this giant frown, and doesn't that speak for how so many of us respond to it? So I think about the opposite of this. I think if somebody was to be partisan, if somebody was to refuse to take a plane ride with the Prime Minister, how so many Canadians might conclude that person is unsuited to the job of leading a country when it's feeling it this way at this point.
And Rob, from your perspective, why is it important for political leaders to step up in a moment like this? What are they sort of providing the country and people in the area when they do that?
Well, you know what, Rosie, they're providing leadership, and I thought they all stepped up and did just that. And setting aside those partisan differences, as Jason said, these are very powerful images when you have the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition holding hands at a vigil. Something that all of us as parents are heartbroken about what happened. And I was in grad school in Montreal in 1989 when the Montreal massacre happened. And I remember at the time it was said, it's hard to draw rational lessons from irrational acts. And that was an irrational act, 14 women, engineering students murdered. And this is another irrational act that's happened. These children, innocent lives ended. And that's not normal in Canada. I'm really glad it's not normal. And if we ever normalize violence like that, we become desensitized to it. And I don't think Canadians are desensitized to it. And I think our leaders did a great job at a terrible time for our country.
Yeah, and even just the holding hand during prayer was, kind of such a powerful image. I agree with you, Rob. But also even the words used, Sherelle, Mr. Polyev sort of praising the Prime Minister's grace in that moment, and the grace that he showed by making sure everybody was able to go there and be with the people.
Yeah, actually, I looked back at the Prime Minister's prepared marks, which we get, and kind of compared them a little bit to what he said. And I did find a few instances of where it had been written for him to say "I," and he had changed it to "we." So I think that was fairly instructive. And you had, like as you just said, Pierre Polyev, he was repeatedly referencing the Prime Minister and his previous words and actions, and just kind of creating that image, that feeling that we are all in this together, and this is not a time for us to be pointing fingers, but literally joining hands. So I did think that was really something which you don't often see, because, you know, I'll be one of the first to, you know, kind of point the finger and say that, you know, these people who put themselves up for these jobs as leaders of political parties, as politicians, as all elected representatives, they are supposed to be leaders in their communities. And a lot of the time, what we've seen is people kind of getting down to the muck and setting the tone, which has over the last few years been not that collegial, I would go as far to say.
Yeah.
So to see it now is in this, you know, in this time, it's an extreme event, and it's unfortunate that it takes such an extreme and devastating event, tragedy, for this to take place. But the fact that they are actually able to put that aside, come together, I do think is a moment, and hopefully, I'm not super hopeful, but hopefully some of that will carry over as they look back and say, you know what, some of these things aren't life and death. We've seen what life and death is, and it's possible for us to do a little better.
Well, I do think that, you know, even the plane ride there, you know, I don't know what the conversations were on board, but I do think just the time spent with one another could sort of shape how these leaders respect one another. So I wonder whether, you know, we'll go back to, you know, all sorts of partisan jabs, but I wonder whether it just sort of changes the undercurrent of what is there, and whether that will be helpful. Obviously, the conversation will turn to some of the questions I asked the minister, and there aren't answers to those questions. But that will be important too, Rob, right? Like trying to get clarity around the guns, mental health, all the issues that factored into what we saw unfold.
Yeah, I mean, there are questions that Canadians have, and I thought you did a very good job, Rosie, putting those questions to the minister, and he was deflecting some of them, understandably, I suppose, on one level, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to see those answers. And I think Pierre Poilievre articulated it well last week when he said, look, there will be a time where we can talk about but this is not that time. This time now is for mourning and remembering those children and the teacher and the mother. And I think that's appropriate. You know, this is a heartbreaking time for our country, but once the mourning kind of dissipates somewhat, we are going to have to look at what we can take from this in terms of policy changes that need to be made. You know, did the red flag law do its job? I'm not sure that it did.
Yeah, and also, as I talked to Bob Zimmer there, Jason, sometimes access to mental health in rural parts of the country is not the same, or it's not adequate.
Yeah, and there are some serious questions. There are many serious questions. I'm grateful that you put the questions to Minister Namasangre, even if he couldn't answer them or wouldn't answer them at this point. You know, I can understand the sensitivity, certainly sensitivity around it, but also the fact that they're, you know, that the RCMP are going through their you know, their motions, and with this investigation, apparently just, you know, removing the tape from the school, as your correspondent reported earlier. So there will come a time for answers, and there will probably be some sharp divisions and disagreements with different parties and policies over this, as there should. I mean, this was a serious issue, and this, you know, there seems like there could have been ways to prevent it, but you know, you know, we'll keep asking those questions, but I don't know if those answers will come anytime soon. I mean, right now, in terms of mourning, I mean, we're sad, but we're still to have some funerals of children who are far too young to have funerals as well.
Listen, appreciate that conversation. Not an easy one, but appreciate you all weighing in. Sherelle Evelyn, Robert Benzie, Jason Markusoff. Have a good Sunday. Thanks. A delegation of 4 U.S. senators went to Greenland earlier this month to try and repair a relationship that was fractured by the U.S. president's threats to annex the NATO-allied territory.
And so, to those resilient, strong, amazing people who are now feeling threat and fear from our country, your ally, it hurts my heart.
We'll hear from that Republican senator about the damage control that they tried to do in Greenland and NATO efforts to ramp up security in the Arctic. That's after the break. You're watching Rosemary Barton Live. NATO is beefing up its presence in the Arctic with a new mission meant to increase security in the region while diffusing tensions within the alliance.
Arctic Sentry leverages the strength of the alliance by bringing together NATO and allied activities in the High North into one overarching operational approach to the region.
That approach will include Norwegian and Danish military exercises, as well as troop deployments from various NATO allies. The initiative, which was created with input from Canadian officials, is a direct response to threats by U.S. President Donald Trump to annex Greenland, the semi-autonomous territory of NATO ally Denmark. U.S. Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski has been outspoken against Trump's Greenland rhetoric. In January, she introduced legislation meant to block the U.S. president from taking over the NATO-allied territory. Earlier this month, she traveled there, where she met with government officials to try and repair the relationship with the U.S. I spoke with her earlier in Toronto while she was there for a conference on Arctic security. U.S. Senator Lisa Murkowski, thank you so much for being here. Nice to see you in Canada.
It's good to be in Toronto, yeah.
Yeah, I want to talk to you obviously mostly about the Arctic, a couple other topics, but I'll start with an announcement by NATO that they have launched a new mission called Arctic Sentry to try and strengthen the presence of NATO in the Arctic. I think to address some of the confusion and issues around the alliance and concerns that President Trump has expressed, I wonder what you make of the mission that NATO has announced and how significant it is.
I welcome it, absolutely welcome it. I had an opportunity several weeks ago to actually speak with UN Secretary General Rutte about this concept. Call it Arctic Sentry, or perhaps Trans-Arctic Alliance, because that's really what we're talking about here, is how our NATO partners, and specifically those that are in the Arctic, can be more focused in partnership, working collaboratively when we're talking about security interests in the Arctic. I think there's a shared interest and certainly a need for collaboration and cooperation amongst our Arctic partners.
How much of this particular mission do you think is in response to some of the concerns that Donald Trump has brought up?
You know, no, I don't think it is in direct response. I think this has been a long time coming. I think there has been a recognition that most of us, the United States is an Arctic nation because of my home state of Alaska. So whether it is in Alaska, whether it's in Canada, whether it's in Greenland, I think we recognize we have not invested as we should in our Arctic security posture. And so we may have done it after and during World War II. We may have done it during the Cold War. But the reality is there's changed threats out there, and we need to come together to meet the need. And I think this is exactly why these types of alliances are going to be so important going forward.
You were just, though, in Nuuk in Greenland, and you spoke with Greenland's Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister, and you reiterated publicly that you are allies. How did those meetings go, given the tension between, obviously not of your doing, but the president threatening to take over Greenland? What kind of reassurance did you give them?
Well, I think it was important that a Senate delegation was in Greenland to basically come and say, look, dialogue is important, partnerships are important, and we want to be working with our Arctic partners. We want to respect the sovereignty of the Kingdom of Denmark and the autonomy of the people of Greenland to determine their future. But we want to be partners with you. And I think that was a very welcome message. I think it was a very reassuring message. It felt different than the environment when I was in Copenhagen just several weeks back, when there was still actually the threat that perhaps the United States might possibly take over through use of military force. Now, the president has taken that off the table. That's important. But there still is a feeling of unsettledness by the people in Greenland. And I think it was important to be able to remind them that we can have shared Arctic security interests and work together, but it comes through dialogue and mutual respect.
What did you make of Donald Trump's threats to Greenland?
Not helpful. Not helpful. Again, we have partnered with, we have had shared security interests with Greenland for decades now. We have a significant presence up in the very high north in Pitavik with that space station there. The Danes and the Greenlanders have made very clear they welcome the United States additional interest in shared security there. They're not saying, no, we don't want any of that. They not only want to work with us and partner with us on security interests, but also on economic interests. But you need to ask, you need to engage in the dialogue. The Greenlanders have an expression, and it's actually part of their security strategy, and it's nothing about us without us. So engage us, dialogue with us. Let's talk about how we can mutually benefit.
What role can Canada play in securing the Arctic? Certainly, Prime Minister Carney is talking more about that as well, and has all sorts of plans for the North. What would you like to see, given how close you are to Canada, in terms of an increased security presence from Canada?
There must be an increased security presence from Canada. Just as I have said, we need to make the investments that we need to do in the U.S. Arctic and Alaska. We've got need for a deep water port in the Arctic, in the U.S. Arctic. Canada needs to step up too. We need to do the modernization of NORAD that we've been talking about, whether it comes down to domain awareness, what we're doing with enhanced communications, infrastructure, dual use infrastructure. There's so much that needs to be done there, but we've got to step into it. I think we have been far too lax in our view of security in the Arctic. This is a vast area. In many areas, it's very inhospitable. The lead times to build anything are long because your seasons are short. Yeah. We've got some work to do, so let's engage. So Canada needs to step up, but I think one of the things that we need to remember is we don't need to try to cover everything on its own. How we partner, just like we do through NORAD, the partnerships that we have there, those have been strong and solid. Let's build on them. Let's make sure that we're supplementing one another and filling in the gaps where we have them.
That makes a lot of sense, but I'm sure you can understand that Canadians are concerned about the relationship with the United States right now. There's reports on this day that President Trump is thinking about leaving the USMCA, or CUSMA as we call it, entirely. He has used that language around the 51st state. He did call this Prime Minister governor. How concerned are you that the things and rhetoric the President is using towards Canada is really damaging the relationship and may never be repaired?
Yeah, the rhetoric doesn't help, clearly. But I think it is important to recognize that, the rhetoric moves in and out, administrations come in and out. But what needs to be enduring is a security relationship between these allies. The United States and Canada, between these neighbors, United States and Canada. Think about, again, the shared alliance that we have had from a security posture over the decades. I know in my home state of Alaska, we are working side by side. Our military is side by side with Canadian military. We saw that in Denmark, where you have up in Pitavik, you have Americans working side by side with Canadian forces. And so these relationships need to endure beyond the rhetoric of the moment. And I know that that's hard, but this is where we've got to have a longer term view and vision about what security means. Security is going to mean predictability and stability. And so we can't forget that.
Senator Murkowski, thank you for making the time for us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
In some non-political good news, Canada has won its first gold at the Olympics. Mikael Kingsbury won gold in the dual moguls. So that's something that will get us through the day celebrating. Thanks so much for watching this program. I'll see you back here next Sunday, if not before. Enjoy your day off for Family Day. If you have one, take good care.